Nowadays, it's so common to feel exhausted and run down and just surrounded with busyness and with things and with tasks on our to-do list.
We all naturally turn towards material things for our happiness, for the most part. But I feel like this is the solution to that true joy that we're searching for.
This is To Live the Truth, the podcast. My name is Ryan Clausen. In this show, my wonderful wife Allie and I dive into my book, To Live the Truth, which you can read for free at ryantclausen.com. Today we're discussing Chapter 12, The Ultimate Shortcut. So this week we're continuing our conversation around the ultimate shortcut, materialism, and we're talking about some of the things that in our modern life can contribute to our lack of enthusiasm and joy in our lives. And I'm drawing from Jesus's parable of the seeds. And the seed represents the word of truth. And in this parable, in one of the cases that Jesus puts forward, the word or the seed is choked out by the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lusts of other things entering in. And so we're going to talk about those three things, and then we're going to talk about something that can counteract the effect that those forces can have on us. So first of all, let's talk about the cares of this world. So as I was thinking about this, I was thinking back on what we talked about a few chapters ago about how Jesus Christ belongs at the center of our faith cycle, right? The degree to which we place truth, Christ, at the center of our lives is the degree to which we can thrive and bear fruit. Christ ought to be the focus of our lives. And it's interesting, just this week, randomly, I encountered this video about Steve Jobs, and something that was kind of one of his central philosophies is that most people suppose that focus means saying yes to the thing that we're focusing on. He says that's not what it is at all. What it is saying no to the thousands of other options that present themselves. That just really struck me as interesting and as true and useful in this conversation, right? We're talking about the cares of this world, that the Greek word translated as cares could also be translated as thoughts or concerns or attentiveness. It comes down to what occupies space in our minds. What are we actively thinking about? Mm-hmm. You know, if you divided your day into what percentage of that day were you thinking about this thing and that thing, you know, what would that graph look like?
Yeah.
And this has always been the case, but it's especially true in modern times that there are just an endless list of options. And nowadays, very actively, aggressively vying to make it onto that graph. And so again, the key to focusing is not just saying yes to Christ, not just letting him in. It's guarding the door so that nothing else gets in that's not worthy of getting in.
Yeah, because if we're just saying yes to our focus, then it's just going to be added onto everything that's naturally fighting for our attention and our time. So that's why you have to say no to those things that are naturally present and that you're drawn to because of the natural man and your appetites, and you have to say no to those things.
Yes. We really can only focus on one thing at a time. So if we acquiesce to every request for our attention, we'll have little time, energy, or desire left to notice, let alone care about anything else. And if we persist in that pattern, then we might easily find ourselves in the same state as the Nephites, whom Samuel the Lamanite rebuked. Ye do not remember the Lord your God, but ye do always remember your riches. The second thing we're going to talk about is the lusts of other things entering in. And I quote Dr. Barry Schwartz, who is a psychologist, and he released a book about 25 years ago called The Paradox of Choice, which is just an excellent book. I highly recommend it. He talks about how there was an interesting study done in which respondents were asked to rate their happiness on a 5-point scale. Some of them had won the lottery within the last year. Others had become paraplegic or quadriplegic as a result of accidents. Not surprisingly, the lottery winners were happier than those who had become paralyzed. What is surprising, though, is that the lottery winners were no happier than people in general. And what is even more surprising is that the accident victims still judged themselves to be happy. As time passes and the winners and the accident victims get used to their new circumstances, the hedonic thermometers in both groups begin to converge, becoming much more like the population at large. He says, I'm not suggesting here that as far as subjective experience goes, in the long run, there's no difference between winning a lottery and being paralyzed in an accident. But I am arguing that the difference is much smaller than you would expect, and much smaller than it appears to be at the moment at which these life-changing events occur. We get used to things. That may very well be the best definition of a human being, is a creature that gets used to things. That's so important to recognize because we have certain expectations or beliefs about how we're going to experience things, and we're terrible at predicting it. We look forward to a vacation and expect it to just be amazing. And so we live in the future and we just kind of drudge through the weeks leading up to that vacation. And we finally get there, and sometimes they turn out great, sometimes they don't. We can't predict it, and we think that if we won the lottery, it would just solve all our problems and we would just be on cloud 9 for the rest of our lives. But right there, it's obvious that that is not the case. We just get used to things.
That is interesting. Well, as you were reading, it got me thinking of people like in third world countries and how they could be just as happy as us in a first world country, and maybe even happier because they're not thrill seeking, and trying to get happy from the next thing that we get or the next vacation and I feel like when I'm living in this way, like looking forward to something, either a vacation or even just a fun event that I have in the evening, I find that I don't enjoy my day as much because all my focus is on later. Like, oh, it's going to be so fun. Like, I just need to get past today. And I've noticed that, like, I'm more ornery with my family and I'm more impatient and just, like, I have a crappy day because I'm just waiting for that big event. And it's sad because it keeps me from living in the moment.
Yeah, you're essentially deferring the joy to a future time, which robs you of the ability to have joy now. And also it can lead to developing a habit of constantly just pushing that joy back further and further and never actually arriving at a place where you can give your permission to enjoy the moment, enjoy the now, which is a really sad result because, again, like we've mentioned before, the now is all we have. If you are ever going to enjoy anything, it's going to be now. It's never going to be in any other time. So this is the reason why anytime you buy a new toy, it's so exciting at first, and then after a little while, once you get used to it, it's not exciting anymore. Or if you discover a new restaurant that you absolutely love, the second time you go to it, it might still bring that same level of pleasure, but then by the third time, by the fourth time, it's not as enjoyable of an experience. And if you don't recognize and predict that and expect it, then you can get trapped into this constant, well, now that restaurant just must have lost its touch. I'm going to look for another restaurant that brings that same level of pleasure. And then you just go through the same pattern over and over again. Oh, that toy isn't really giving me fun anymore. I'm going to chase after this other toy. So what do we do about it? One powerful antidote or remedy to these two forces, I argue, is something called thauma in Greek, which is often translated as wonder. And so let's talk about wonder a little bit. It's important to recognize two definitions of wonder, which is wonder is one, astonishment or surprise, right? But then there's also wonder the verb, which the definition would be to be curious about or to be confused by even, right? Both of those are essential components to wonder.
Ross D. Inman writes, "We stand in wonder before many things above, below, beyond, and within. We wonder at the mind-boggling immensity of the Grand Canyon below, or at the starry expanse above, at the human genius and achievement that crowns the scientific enterprise, at a courageous act of self-sacrifice, or at the alluring beauty of a scene from Les Miserables."
Right, exactly. There's countless objects that surround us that could be wonders. And these marvels, these wonders that we encounter can remind us that there is more to reality than just the physical realm if we allow it to do that.
I like the idea of these are God's advertisements. I think it's just a fun way to look at it.
Yeah, I like that too. And I guess that's really part of what I'm getting at here. What we need to do to make wonder part of our lives is develop the habit of seeing those things for what they are. And especially nowadays where there's miraculous things happening all the time. I mean, really, if you step back and just think about the fact that how many of the most powerful kings in history would give up their entire kingdoms just to fly in an airplane once.
Yeah.
And so many things that we enjoy, not just technological, but just natural marvels, even the people we interact with, and maybe especially the people we interact with on a daily basis, each one of them is a wonder and an incredible, unique soul. And it's a shame to realize that by being surrounded by these, we can become blind to the wonderfulness of them. We can become bored even, you know?
It's silly to me that we can be bored with these miraculous, amazing things. So we have to turn our attention and our focus on an Amazon order. That's just funny.
Yeah.
You know, that's...
It's funny when you think about it, but and yet it's so easy, you know?
And it happens to all of us.
I remember on a vacation once, we went on a glass bottom boat and we were just going out over the ocean and we were able to see all kinds of different sea creatures. You know, we saw stingrays and sharks and starfishes and just a whole bunch of kind of fish, right? And then when we got back, I just heard one of the guys that was on the ship with us, his family was waiting for him on shore and they asked him how it was. And he just kind of shrugged and he said, you see one fish, you see them all. You know, and that's kind of just an example of like, are you serious? Like, I don't know. Where are you going from here? You going home to just like watch a TV show or something? Like that was kind of a once in a lifetime experience. And I don't know what his mindset was or where he came from, but like, it just really kind of shocked me because I had an experience of wonder. I saw things I had never seen before and it kind of blew my mind. And yet someone having the same experience found it to be trivial and mundane. It's just so interesting, you know? But what I love about the idea of wonder is that it often is a shocking experience. That's part of it. It's surprising. It opens your eyes to how limited your perspective had been up to that point. And we talked a couple weeks ago about that poem about the flower in the crannied wall and how on the surface you could see a flower and just kind of disregard it as commonplace and ordinary. But sometimes something can trigger in your mind to realize, well, there's so much more depth to this than I realized. And those are, to me, they're I don't know, they're like goosebump moments when I have my eyes opened to that reality sometimes, you know, and there's so many opportunities for that. There's the obvious ones, like when you go see one of the wonders of the world, or when you look up at the night sky and see a star and you realize that the light that's entering your eyes right now has been traveling for millions of years. You know, those kind of moments are obvious, but even just looking at a flower.
Yeah. Every year when we plant our seeds to start our garden, that's something that's so small, but it brings so much wonder to me. It's the same thing every year, and I know exactly what it looks like every year. But when that little zinnia flower pokes up, or when that little bean plant just sprouts. Like, it's just miraculous to me that you put this little seed in the dirt and a week later you have this little green living thing coming up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And that's so cool to me. I really love this part in your book. On page 188, you said, we experience this emotion of wonder when something brings to our awareness the fact that this material world is not as simple or transparent as we might have imagined, that each of us is a small part of something far greater. So anytime that we're brought to that realization, that's wonder. And that's why God is using this advertisement or this wonder to turn our focus to Him and to realize that there is a God and that this material world is not everything. It's not it.
Yeah. So like I say, attempting to experience wonder as frequently as possible may be our best, or one of our best strategies for countering the effects of the cares of this world and the lusts of other things. So how do we experience wonder as frequently as possible is the question. And the answer is not to go chasing after big, wondrous things necessarily, right? It really, the better key is to find wonder and make room for wonder in your day-to-day, in your everyday hometown experience.
And sometimes that means subtraction, again, instead of adding.
Exactly.
Get rid of some of your to-do list or that, I don't know,
unworthy tasks from your schedule. It may be removing just the sheer mass of material things you're surrounded with all the time, literally to make space for wonder in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But there are activities you can add that can invite more wonder into your life. And we've already mentioned some of them, just spending time with loved ones, spending time in nature, spending time in worship, practicing a musical instrument. But my number one suggestion for developing the daily habit of wonder is to consume more living media, particularly living books, and to avoid consuming twaddle, because twaddle generally reinforces the strength of the cares of this world and the lusts of other things. And really, just some of the best living books are just filled with moments of wonder that shock you out of the humdrum of the everyday and present to you new ideas or perspectives that you'd never considered before. So, at the end of all this, why does this matter? What's the point? What problem are we solving? Who needs to hear this?
I don't think there's a person out there that doesn't get distracted by the cares of this world and doesn't get caught in just the busyness of life, but also just the dissatisfied feelings. And we all turn towards the material things for our happiness, for the most part. Like, it's just what we naturally turn towards. But I feel like this is the solution to that true joy that we're searching for.
Yeah. Nowadays, it's so common to feel exhausted and run down and just surrounded with busyness and with things and with tasks on our to-do list. And it's also so common to be just drowning in disappointment and letdowns because we are constantly chasing after something and never quite arriving there. Understanding the proper relation that we human beings ought to have with the material world and the influence that making time to truly wonder can have on us is the key to counteracting all of that exhaustion and disappointment. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. We may address them in a future episode. Also, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the podcast. It really helps others find us. Finally, I wish you peace and success, and I look forward to chatting again.